Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Moments That Define Us, and your host, Irina Barnett. I am so excited because today we're talking about motherhood again. And I'm saying again because for the past 2 episodes, we've been talking about motherhood and different motherhood journey, postpartum depression, and different resources or lack of resources. But today I'm actually talking about the expert. She is a doula and a founder of She Birth Bravely. Her name is Suzzie Vehrs, and she's joining me on the podcast today. Suzzie, welcome to Moments That Define Us.
Thank you so much for having me here.
So you're going to tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey, but also you are a doula. So you're going to tell us exactly what doulas do, what you do with the organization. Suzzie also has an online childbirth training. So if you are a new mom or if you are preparing to be a mom, you can join her online training, and I will put all that information once I release the podcast. But Suzzie, let's talk a little bit about you and who you are. And I want to actually start with you getting a degree in finances and working in that area. So tell me, what actually drew you to finance?
I would have to say maybe nepotism with that one. My
Oh,
dad worked in finance, and when I was a kid, every year I would go to Bring Your Daughter to Work Day. And I just really, really, really loved the company that he worked for. And, there were so many days, especially I started going when I was young, maybe like 8 or 9. It was like a yearly thing. And then when I got into high school, when you have those days where you're like, you just can't do the school thing. Like there's drama with your friends and you're on your period, or like school is like, you can't do it. My dad would let me go into work with him because we had that foundation of me being in the office with him from the like organized Bring Your Daughter to Work days. And he would let me do like actual work. He would assign me projects and I would like help put things together, and then he would go present them at the meeting a few hours later, which I loved, and that gave me so much confidence in myself. And so when I went to school, I applied to I initially started in a business school, and then I switched into economics, and my degree was in economics, and then I went to work for the same company that my dad did after I graduated, which I loved. I had so much fun there.
you know what I love about what you just said, how bring your kids to work day. I feel like now in the environment we live now, where so much work is done via Zoom or any other online platform and just work from home. Not a lot of parents, I guess, have that, like bring your kids to work day. People have this assumption, which depends where you work in finance, that you make a lot of money, right? So you were an investment banker, is that right?
I was a financial advisor. So I was one of those people where, if you have questions about your retirement account or you're trying to decide what to invest in, that I could, I had all my licenses and could kind of answer all those questions and give some guidance there. But no, I did not make a lot of money, even though I worked for the company my dad worked in. I started at the very beginning in the like very smallest role. And in those about 5 years that I worked there, I did work my way up quite a bit, like I was a hard worker and I was good at what I did and I loved the company. But like anyone else, you start at the entry level job and you just progress.
Work your way up. You know what I also wanted to ask you, did you feel pressure, maybe, oh, because my dad worked in finances, so I have to go and work in finances? Or did you actually, like when you went to college, when you start going with your dad to work, you actually love finances and numbers?
It's actually the opposite. My family is quite conservative, and my job, my education was always kind of viewed more as like a hobby. Like I kind of had to fight for that path of being a corporate girly. I was very much had a lot of pressure in my life to be a stay-at-home mom, that the woman's place in the world is in the house. And one thing I appreciate about that point of view is that I grew up with a lot of respect for stay-at-home mothers and
Yeah.
viewing that as a full-time job. However, I was very torn because there was very much a sense of like, well, you can work until you have kids, or like, like even though I was doing equal work to my peers and it was viewed as like, oh, but this is a hobby for you, whereas it's a career for them. And that was very tough for me. I think that my relationship with wanting to become a mother was very like fragmented because there was a part of me that desperately wanted to be kids, but I also loved my career and I loved that part of me and I loved contributing in the world that way. And I hated that I felt like if um if I did one, I couldn't do the other. And that
Mhm.
choosing to be both would be detrimental to my family. So,
Yeah. It
yeah.
is very, it is very traditional. I have to say, like, point of view, especially for our generation, right? Because we grew up, I guess most of us grew up where our dad would work and our mom would, like my mom, for example, she worked and then she stayed home with us until we were the beginning of middle school, and then she went back
Mhm.
to work. So it is point of view that a lot of us women had, growing up. But you are so, like, we can do both and we can do both great, but we still viewed in society as either do one or do the other. It's like, I like that saying when they say you have to, if you choose to go back to work, you have to work like you don't have kids, and you have to mother, like you have to parent like you don't go to work. So it's just, I don't know, sometimes I think we've gone so far, it seems like, and sometimes when you look at certain issues, it's like, oh my gosh, it's still the same.
There's a lot of progress that needs to be made as far as work-life balance and
Mhm.
how do you fit in the corporate world when I mean, raising my kids, I have felt that like I love my career so much. It means so much to me. But at the same time, you have to have stronger boundaries about when you're available, about
Mhm.
when you're getting your work done. You have to be present. You take days off for sick days. It is a tricky balance.
So, what kind of defining moment started happening? Something was telling you need to switch, that finances was no longer, finances, economics, all of that was no longer serving you.
Yeah, it was not just like one specific moment where it was like, boom, this doesn't work. But when I had my first daughter, Zoe, I had to make a choice. Do I go back to work or do I stay at home? And I had 6 weeks to make that decision. And my now ex-husband, but her father was just finishing his master's. So when
Mhm.
he got a job, we had to move. So it was very much like, okay, well, we had already always planned on me being a stay-at-home mother. We like are moving, so I can't legitimately actually keep my job. And where I was in finance was exactly as you said. There was no like part-time, it was like I
Yeah.
worked 50, 60 hours a week most weeks. And that was the expectation. And so it was a very it was an emotional decision to say goodbye to that career, but I felt I would say conflictedly good about trying the stay-at-home mom thing. It was very difficult for me. But I did, at the time I made that decision, felt like it was something I wanted to explore and pursue. So that was one decision. The midwifery desire kind of grew completely separate with having before I had my first daughter, I had a pregnancy that I lost that was like life threatening.
Mhm.
Very emotional, very scary, very had health consequences. Zoe's birth was scary. Um, like lots of crazy things, emergency C-section. And so I thought birth was wild and scary and never really wanted to do it again. And then I became best friends with a midwife. And I think we would go hiking pretty much every week. We were in just like a new moms group because baby's the same age, and you need to make your community when you have newborns. And when I was hearing her stories, I was like, whoa, there is something different about the experiences you are having and the type of care that's around your clients and your patients than what I have ever experienced. And the potential of birth is so much different. And so when I had my daughter Hazel, I just had a completely different spiritual, emotional, physical journey. I am one of those wild people that did a home birth and gave birth in the water. And that just like lit my heart on fire. And I thought, like, I really want to be involved in this work somehow.
Mhm.
I didn't have really that much support from my then husband. And so I started with the doula training because that's like the lowest amount of training you need to kind of get your foot in the door and be helpful at a birth. And I always planned on going the midwifery route, but then I fell in love with being a doula and having that when you're working with families, you're walking them through the threshold of parenthood, of motherhood. It's a rebirth of the mother. It's an identity shift. It's massive growth relationship wise for the mother and the father. It's demanding physically, it's demanding emotionally. Even if you're not religious, it is like definitely a spiritual experience. And
It is.
the person you are when you hold your baby in your arms is not the person that imagined that moment, right?
Mhm.
And I realized that as a doula and as a business owner, that I have the flexibility to adjust my packages to my moms and to show up in ways that are not just clinical.
Yeah,
And I hated having that decision between like if I pursue the midwifery route, even though I was very fortunate to have a very holistic care in my own pregnancy, that business wise, like my midwife that was mine doesn't practice anymore because it's very difficult to have that holistic midwifery practice. And if you go into the system, then you're just a tool in the system that's almost using and abusing women's bodies through the birth process, profiting off of it in these 10-15 minute prenatals and calling that true care, right?
yeah,
And so as I was a doula, I just realized like this is where I want to be, at least for now, until I can find a way to have that more holistic practice in midwifery. Then I probably will pursue that advanced degree and gain the clinical skills as well. But until then, to be adjacent and to work in ways caring holistically for a mother that's all the ways but clinical is pretty.
yeah. Can you, because you talk about doula and then you talk about midwives. So for
Mhm.
people that don't know, what is the difference between doula and between midwife?
Yeah. Yeah. So midwives and OBs are essentially they're taking care of the medical picture of a woman through her pregnancy. So they're taking your blood pressure, they're prescribing medications, they're resolving emergencies. If your baby has a stuck shoulder, they're trained in how to like pop it out.
Okay.
Um, there is a difference between the way midwifery is most commonly practiced now, which very much mirrors the obstetrical practice, versus a traditional midwife, which is what I had in my second pregnancy, where I had hour-long prenatal appointments. She saw me probably 15-20 times, and she was there. Like I had that one person throughout my birth and and in my postnatal care. So I truly had that continuity of care with that one person who knew me and cared for me very deeply. Versus in most of our midwifery and obstetrics, you have 10-15 minute appointments. You are with whoever's on call that day. Your appointments will be like jumping between people. And typically, midwives are working with more low risk people, and they're really working primarily towards vaginal births, where
Mm.
obstetrics is more medical. They're more likely to jump to cesarean sections to work with very high risk people in more complex and take over more complex cases.
Okay. Okay. So we are going to talk about your practice and doulas and kind of your experience with families, but I want to talk about your own motherhood journey. So you mentioned that your very first pregnancy, it was a loss. Can I ask you how far along were you pregnant before the loss happened?
Yeah, I was only 14 weeks, so it wasn't necessarily like a stillbirth. It did affect me quite a bit. I was it's amazing the depths of your emotions, how quickly you connect to that child when you're
Mhm.
right. And then I had what was called a molar pregnancy, which means that my placenta was kind of growing cancerously. And so even after I had had a DNC to kind of like remove the pregnancy when it was deemed unviable, I still had all these cancerous cells in me that were multiplying rapidly. And so I had to be monitored for, my body thought I was pregnant still. So I still
Mm.
had some like side effects from that, like the morning sickness and things like that. And I also had to go in for weekly blood draws to make sure that my body was stabilizing, which took almost a year. I was very fortunate though, because a lot of people who have that complication have to go through chemotherapy, and I did not. So I just had a lot of blood draws and a lot of like the what if cycling through my mind. Um, I guess I had a more mild, I don't know. It's hard to say, like when you think it's hard, but it could be harder.
Yeah.
Um,
But 14 weeks, that's already, how they say, like when you are at 12 weeks, you can start telling people because that's safe, right? Generally. So it's, and even if you did or didn't tell people, it doesn't matter because I do agree with you. When you find out you're pregnant, right? Like right away, you connect with the child. Or most women, I think, connect with the child. Where you start feeling it. I'm growing the baby. So it's, and then when the loss happened, it's just, and for you it happened. I'm so sorry that happened. I was reading how for the whole year, and you just said for the whole year what you had to go through to make sure you and your body was okay. And then did you feel like during that time when you were going through the blood draws, through everything, and also battling losing your child, did you feel like you have the support that you needed from, I guess, in the medical field, and also from your spouse, from your friends and family?
Yeah. I think that was my first experience with death, with loss, with grief. And I don't think I necessarily had the tools to process. I
Mm.
wish I had gone to therapy at that time, but um, I feel the same for my ex-husband, that we probably just, we didn't have the tools. Um, I wouldn't say he was necessarily supportive, but I also don't think he was. I think we were just young and unprepared for grief. Medically speaking, the doctor that did my DNC was very thoughtful. He's the one that kind of like did the procedure to remove the pregnancy from my body. He was very compassionate during that. And then he called me personally 2 days later, after I had been home, and like you're processing this, and he said to me, I need you to come back to the office. And I was like, okay, was there something, like he didn't say anything was wrong, but he was just very person like, I need you to come back today, like get here soon. And it was very strange. And then when I got there, he looked at me and he said, I need you to take a pregnancy test. And at that moment, I thought, how cruel could you be? I mean, you literally just removed this pregnancy I wanted from my body. And how, like my understanding was that if you weren't pregnant, it was impossible for a pregnancy test to come back positive. And so I took the pregnancy test and it came back positive. And then he sat down with me. It was just me and him. And he explained to me that my procedure that he had done had not seemed normal, that he thought I might have had this rare complication, and that they needed to do, like they had sent out the tissue for to look at it. And he was very compassionate in the moment. And he was very helpful in helping me get started with like understanding what the a process would be like to like hopefully get back to health and get back to being able to like be healthy enough to try again. And he he there were a couple times where he just called me out of the blue to check in and there were some things he offered that I didn't take advantage of that I wish I had. Like one was a grief group that he invited me to. And so I do feel like in that moment, in this high risk situation, that he was phenomenal and very supportive. But it was very interesting because he was then my same OB that I had with Zoe, um, which was my first healthy pregnancy. And it was so bizarre because it was like, well, it was in the middle of a group practice. So I saw him like a couple times through that pregnancy. And then he was on call the day I delivered. And it was like he did not even remember who I was, didn't spend
Mm.
any time with me. I was very much like in that cascade of intervention story, which was like whiplash, to
Yeah, yeah,
go
yeah.
from like relying so heavily on this medical system to being like feeling like I was almost victimized by that same system in my second birth. So it was very I had a lot of very conflicting emotions about that, and it took me a long time to process.
Oh, I'm sure that, yeah. But you know what something really interesting you said, which makes me think of so many things. You said, that was my first time with grief, with loss, and I didn't know how to process. And the same you said for your ex-husband. And when it comes to birth and postpartum and all of that, I've heard so many women say, I wish I went to therapy, right? Because it prepares you. Like the guest I had on, she had postpartum depression, really, really severe, right? And she's like, I wish I went to therapy. I wish I was taking some sort of medication because it was not, she was suicidal, and she said, I had no tools, no resources to go there. So it just, to as many women as talk to, it feels like it's the same kind of thing. I wish I had more resources. I wish I known this or that, and it's not very, maybe in smaller practices, but like if you look in general in the medical system, it's not really telling you and preparing you in a healthy way to go into parenthood.
There's a big difference between being clinically safe and being holistically safe. When I had Hazel, I was found a very rare midwife. Um, Traditional midwives are very rare, very difficult to find. But in traditional midwifery, appointments are an hour long or more, and you meet with them regularly. And they are trying to prepare you not just to, they're monitoring your clinical, your vitals, right? But they're also like stepping in as therapists and helping you understand what you've experienced to this point, helping you understand what the work of labor is, helping you understand that you're on this transformative process into motherhood. There's a lot of symbolism in the fact that you give up your name to become mom. And I know when I say my daughter's friends' parents, it's not like, oh, my friend Anya. It's like Sophia's mom, Anya.
Mm.
And I know they save me as like Zoe's mom, Suzzie,
Yeah.
Yeah, like there's a lot of symbolism in that. And our care as we go through pregnancy, if it was designed correctly, would shepherd us through that process. But you can't do that in 10 minutes. There's no way to do that in 10 minutes. We've been reduced only to our clinical value. And then when things go wrong emotionally, depression is such a big factor. The number one cause for maternal mortality right now is actually suicide, which is a huge problem. It's the fact that we're coming through this in systems that are literally emptying us out, stripping of us of our courage, making us rely too heavily on things outside of ourselves, and then leaving us with one visit in 6 weeks to get birth control instead of get true help, right?
Yeah, it's very much like in and out type of situation.
I would argue, though, that the system is just as abusive to the people, the providers inside of it, as it is to the mothers. That I don't think that there are very many doctors or midwives or nurses that said, you know what? I really want to be offering the women I work with 10 to 15-minute appointments. I think that the majority of them want to be giving more, but they're limited by the fact that they have tremendous costs. They if they're working in a group practice, then they're basically like dictated by insurance what they can do. And so they have to do those 10-minute appointments and they don't get to choose unless they're willing to work pretty much completely outside of the system, then they don't have the opportunity to give those longer and more in-depth prenatals, which is so sad, and why so many you see, like obstetrics and midwifery, people burn out of those careers really fast. The average midwife is only there for 5 years, and most of them quit because they say, I can't practice the right way. I'm dangerous in the system because the system is dangerous.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, it's like I said, it's not the people, it's the system that they work in. That a lot of people, in different areas, you work in this like concrete systems that are, that were built there for a reason. But then when you come there and you wanted to change something, and you can, right? Because you said you're bound by so many different rules and red tapes and stuff like that. You brought up this really great point about losing your name. Naturally, when we become mom, like you said, it's like, it's not my name anymore. I am Hazel's mom, right? I
Yes.
wanted to ask you about how did you deal with or come to accept like that chapter as being a mom, and also how are you still mom and also Suzzie? Like, what's the balance? Like, how do you still do things for yourself
Yes.
away from everything else and taking care of everybody? Because we as women, as mom, we take care of everybody and we leave ourselves less. So tell me, how do you do that for yourself?
Yes. Well, I think right now I'm in a place in my life where that's set up structurally so that I don't really have to think about it. But when I got divorced, one of the really difficult things is that you don't like, I didn't agree with my ex-husband about very many things, and he was not very involved with the children at the time. Like, I remember sitting there with my lawyer, and she was like, well, how much time does he spend with the kids? And I was like, I have never had a day away from the house. I have never not done it at bedtime. I think the most he's ever like taken care of both kids together at that time had been for like 2 hours. Um, Maybe once or twice. It was he didn't spend time with he struggled, I think, stepping into that parenthood role. But then you get divorced and you have this parenting plan. And we live in Washington, which really supports a 50-50 parenting plan. So it forces you to make decisions you don't want to make, but then makes everybody grow. So like our parenting plan was at first about 70-30, and then it switched to 50-50. And that meant that I had to take my kids, whom I love and whom I adore, and who relied pretty much primarily on me for everything. And I had to bring them to his apartment. And when they clung onto my body and did not want to go, you have to literally, like, you are legally obligated to make them stay. And you have to walk out and you leave and you cry and you feel terrible. And the parenting, I would argue, was probably pretty terrible in those early years, but yet he had to figure it out, right? And I think for the most part, he has kind of figured it out. I
Yeah.
don't think if I didn't feel like I had to go through that whole divorce process, I could have, until I was legally obligated to, because I had now this parenting plan, and now there was like, okay, I actually have to follow through with this. Like, I have to uncling the child from my body and put them on the couch and run and
Yeah.
close the door because that was the only way I could leave, right? And at the moment, that was like the most difficult and heartbreaking moment. And I wish I had learned, like, when we were in couples therapy, and if I had had that strong of boundaries then, which I wasn't strong enough to hold on my own in that relationship, like he could always find a way out. And I always was like, oh, I want the best for my kids. And so I always compensated. Um, that he never really had to learn, but when he had to, he did. And so I think like now I have time away from my kids whether I want it or not. And some of those days are terribly lonely.
Mhm.
And yet in that grief and that difficulty and those challenging emotions and that, oh, it feels so bad sometimes, you also lay a new foundation, right? Like you eventually realize like, well, I have to be the healthiest version of myself when my kids get back, which means that I have to take care of myself in this moment. And you take care of yourself differently. And you're a better parent when your kids are back with you. And you have time to build a career. You have time to go rock climbing. You have time to go to a spa or get your nails done because you don't have any other choice, right? And I think that if I have a lot of moms ask me about divorce, and I always think like, just make a parenting plan in your head. Think about what 70-30 or 50-50 truly means, and just go make yourself do it in your relationship. It will be hard, but my guess is that if most people like that we are as much I realized and I learned through that process that I was in my compensating and my trying to make it okay and my waiting for the other person to like step up and do it, that if I had just had a true boundary, probably everything else would have worked out, you know? We had other things in our relationship too, so it wasn't necessarily like I think it was the right decision for us. I really think if we had had that boundary sooner, things might have been very different.
Yeah, it is very important to build boundaries. You're right. It is. And also, I think I used to be a nanny for different families, right? When I was younger. And so I would see, I remember specifically working for this family, and her husband, they had twins. And her husband would tell her, go take a nap. Like Irina is here, I think was working from home. He's like, if I'm here. So he would offer that. And she was like, no, no. Basically, she didn't say it, but she implied like nobody can take care of my kids the way I do. And she was specifically implying to her husband. And I remember at that time, I was in my early 20s. I was like, oh, I was like, well, I remember thinking like, isn't that supposed to be like when you have kids, like, like kind of everybody takes care of the kids, right? Husband, both spouses. She was like, no, no, no. Right, right. Like I could go and take a nap. And sometimes is women just kind of taking everything on without even realizing. But a lot of the times there are situations like you described, to where husbands, and I don't know if it's how some men are raised, thinking, oh, it's women, right? She births, she breastfeeds, she does, like it's all on her, right? And sometimes they just don't, are not involved. And that becomes, because it is so hard because we just went through the birth. And especially in those early days, oh my goodness, how important it is to have that, that support, that go take a nap, go whatever you need to do. I'm here because this is also my child. How old are your kids now? You have two girls.
7 and 11, and they are thriving and happy and so cute. And well, my 11-year-old is a preteen, so she is moody sometimes, but they're just spectacular in every way.
Yeah. And so now it's been some time has passed since you have gotten divorced. How is co-parenting now?
Yeah, me and my ex-husband, we don't talk. So that is like so fabulous, when you need someone out of your life, it's great when they're finally out. I think that it's very different because there's not as many financials in the picture, right? Like we're not paying for daycare, we're not paying for preschool. That was very problematic in our co-parenting relationship. And things like extracurriculars, we have now come to an agreement on those where that those used to be like battles. And I'm glad I fought those battles. I think they were very important. And I think that I'm happy with the battles that I fought and the ones that I didn't. I think that right now it's really easy that the girls have two homes. They
Mhm.
have a great rhythm. They have most of their friends are here, but a few years ago he remarried, and so they have step siblings, which I think has been really great for them because I think for a while they were really isolated at his house because isn't naturally like he doesn't put the effort in to build those social relationships, and he lives far enough away that it's not convenient for them to come back here and be with their friends here. So I think now that they have like a family rhythm,
Yeah.
I have not really met their stepmother. I would recognize her, but I don't know her. But I assume she must be doing something pretty good because they have been happier since she's been around, which I'm deeply grateful for. Um, and so I think that it goes pretty well. Like most of our texts are just like, we're going to be early, we're going to be late. Zoe's out of school today. Like the things that we used to be like big points of contention or arguing. One, our parenting plan is fantastic. So it spells things out really well. And two, we've stuck to it. So there's, most of those things we would fight about are decided already by a
Yeah.
third party that's like the state would enforce, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's I'm glad that you both of you found what works for you, because it is hard to go through divorce, and especially when the kids are involved, you have to do those. I just, was listening to you when you said I had to like unclench my kids and put them on the couch and then run, and how emotional it was. Like, yeah, it is hard. And especially if you are more, parenting more than the other. But I'm glad you found that happy medium that works for you, that works for your girls, and that's awesome.
I think that they, like when we were married, they were not bonded to their dad hardly at all. So like
Mhm.
when he would come home, even if, like they wouldn't spend time with him, they weren't interested in seeing him because he didn't spend time with them. And so that was like an escalating problem. But when you get divorced, they're like forced to spend time together and they do build a bond. And when I think about those moments that were so hard and like I just would like sit in my car and like bawl for hours to go from there to like now where I see them so happy, I'm just
Mhm.
so grateful that I made those hard decisions. Obviously, if you're still married, if you get the right support, maybe you can make those like tough calls, like, like that decision to be like, I'm going to leave my kids with their father. I could have made that while we were still married,
Yeah.
but we're in such a better place now. So when it's the right decision, it's the right decision. And if you don't know yet, then you shouldn't pursue it. Should exhaust
Right.
other resources.
And I think I have a friend, she's an artist, and she always talk about how some people in our lives are like butterfly. They come to our life for a reason, or we come into their life for a reason, right? And so it made me think about you and your ex-husband, how, you came together and you created this beautiful, amazing girls, right?
Hmm.
But then the divorce needed to happen so they could build a good relationship with their dad. Because maybe if you're still married, and the situation was the same as it was prior, right? Then
Yeah.
they wouldn't have relationship with their dad. So it's always like every situation that we have in our life has some lessons to teach us. One more question on your motherhood.
Yeah.
What do you think is your best quality as a mother?
Ooh, best quality. Um, I think that I learned to enjoy it. Like the work of mothering, the sacrifices of mothering, the long bedtimes. I remember like it used to take me like an hour to get Zoe to bed when she was little, and I had so much resentment about that. I still spend an hour with like half an hour to 45 minutes with each of my kids on the nights that they're here. We read together, we talk, I scratch their backs. And those things that I just thought were like so much going out of me, like
Mhm.
are the things that fill me up now. And I love those routines. My daughter Zoe, like when she got to the point where she didn't want me to read to her anymore, she said, Mom, how about you bring your book and sit on my bed and read next to me? And I just like, we do that
Wow.
almost every night now. And all the nights that she's here at my house. And it's just really like, I don't know, motherhood, it's like you get so much out of those relationships. Like, not that your kids are there to serve you, but like when you genuinely love them and you pour into them and you see them light up, like you get so much more back than you could ever give.
Absolutely.
You are also taking care of yourself because I think there is a limit to that. But yeah.
Yeah, it's that unconditional love that I think people don't understand. Like there's such a special love between parent and a child that it's like I remember before I had kids, our friend used to tell me, you don't understand. And I was like, well, I love my husband, I love my parents, you know what I mean? Like, what don't I understand? And it's like you can't put it into words. You have to, once you become a parent, like it's a whole different type of beautiful love. Oh, those kids, sometimes they drive us crazy, but they are awesome most of the time. So tell me how did you decide? I know you had a midwife with your second pregnancy, and then you just loved that experience and you said I wanted to do more of that. But tell me about going into that, what you've learned, and also not only you are a doula, but you are a business owner,
Uh,
which is a whole different thing. You know, a lot of people go into business because they have passion for something,
mhm.
right? But then they forget that they still have to run a business, you know. So tell me your journey as creating a business, becoming a doula, and how was that for you at the early stages?
Yeah, the early stages were very hard. I did my training, my doula training when Hazel was about 6 months to a year old, and so most of it, I did all my reading and all my essays and all of that stuff mostly when she was breastfeeding. Like, I would nap trap myself and pull up the books on my Kindle, and I'd stay up super late, and I would knock that stuff out as I could. And that took a lot of effort. Um my husband, ex-husband, I think one of the reasons that I know, like, okay, there are good things that have come out about them, like having a relationship, which is positive. But I would say we also had like some financial abuse in our relationship, which is one of the things where I'm like, yeah, I needed to leave for our financial security as children. And I'm so grateful that, like, to leave that dynamic of relying on him for that when he didn't want us to, use finance
Mhm.
for control and power, and to be able to take that. But it was hard because he was not supportive. He was very negative. He used to say things to me all the time like, you can't even tie your shoes before you leave the house. What makes you think you can run a bit, run a business? Like, just really derogatory, negative things. And it was just like constant. So a lot of the confidence that I think I naturally had from growing up in the family I had with, a mother who is so, she overcame a lot in her life too. And, my dad very much supported me in finance and not so much in my doula career. They were both kind of like, "Ugh, what is that?" But like that natural confidence, I kind of lost it. And so it was a very like, I would say like gritty time, rough time. I spent a lot of time in meditation, a lot of time in stillness, trying to like hold on to this one little part of me that thought maybe I could do this. Um, I did my training, I did my first couple births. Um, One thing that really, really helped, I think, get my feet on the ground was that this is like the most niche thing in the world, but there was a business here in the area where they would set up heated water birth tubs for home births with the midwives. And the girl that ran that kind of like went to Germany, and her company, like, whoever was supposed to be running it for her didn't go the way she planned when she left. And my friend that had been my doula was like, I was just finishing her midwifery school, and she was like, "Hey, I have these tubs. I need somebody to set them up. I need somebody to like be the person that will do this. I will teach you how to do it and set you up with this part of the business. so that my clients have their tubs because I kind of need them at the birth. And so that gave me like immediate, not a lot of financial security, but like a couple, like a couple thousand a month, which was like very helpful.
Yeah.
Mm, And then when I went through the divorce, I had a lot of pressure to go back into finance. And I really actually wanted to because it's so, so stable. But I didn't think because our divorce was so wild, I thought that I was at a really big risk of, like I didn't know what one of the things that was happening was like he just wasn't showing up for his days, or the kids would be sick and, it was his day, but it was me taking care of the kids. And so, like, I was pretty sure if I went back into the same demanding career that I would be fired because
Mhm.
you can't just leave your kids at home. And
Right.
we're in Seattle, and with 2 kids, you're gonna end up if you want full-time childcare, that's gonna be $3 to $5,000 a month, and
My
even
gosh.
though, like, legally, the parenting plan is like, yeah, you both have to contribute to that, there's no way my ex-husband was, and he never really did to the preschool and things like that, even though and that legal process to go, like, enforce that is, like,
Mhm.
messy. So I was like, "Okay, I'm just gonna go all in on my business." I luckily had a couple friends that supported me with childcare so that, like, you know, not having to earn 3 to $5,000 out the gate and keep those childcare expenses lower was, like, really helpful. It was very chaotic at the beginning,
Oh, I'm
but
sure.
I just took it one step at a time, and, I initially did a lot of backup work where, it was also, like, post-COVID, so you still had to, like, quarantine if you had an exposure, so, if you're a doula and you go to the hospital, you get exposed, you have to spend 15 days, you
Oh
needed
my gosh,
backup, like, it
yeah.
was super chaotic, super good for someone like me that was like, "I'll go, I'll go, I'll go," like, I was able to get a lot of experience and not have that responsibility of being so on call, like, when my kids were gone, I could pretty much guarantee I could be at a birth, which I couldn't really guarantee that now, right? Like, now I have more
Mhm.
ownership over my clients, but I'm there when they give birth, which is, like, anytime over the course of a month. So, I just took it step by step, and when, like, every 3 to 6 months, I'd reevaluate what was working, what was not working, what was changing in the market because it was changing very rapidly. And I was just, making a lot of mistakes. I was very imperfect, but I had a lot of momentum and just moved. Like that was my only thing was like don't stop running. And eventually I found myself on solid ground.
Yeah. So many defining moments I was just picking from the story you were saying, how sometimes some moments present to us just to test us. Are we ready? Are we ready? Right? Like I was, because you said I was ready to go into finances. And then I was like, all of these things were happening. Like, no, I have to be here because of these reasons, right? And also something so beautiful that I think women do so much better, because you said I had great group of friends that supported me, right? You build that community around you, for yourself, for your children. You build that foundation to start your business, right? You put all these things in place. That's what we naturally do. We do all these things, right? Like, oh, we plan the play dates and all of that. Just
Yeah.
build that community around us so they
Mhm.
can come and help us when we need.
Yeah, and I do think, like, you have to be a villager too, like,
Yeah.
my friends that helped me, I was also they had different needs than I did, but I was very aware of, like, "Okay, if you're watching my kids for 8 hours, I'm making sure you have dinner and that you're getting 10 hours of childcare on the back end," right? Like and our kids played so well together, it's almost easier to watch both sets of kids than just your own, But, like, we really did take care of each other in those moments, and, some of those relationships really grew, and some as we got busy in different ways because we were supporting each other in We were almost moving in different directions as we were giving each other momentum to do that. We don't even always see each other now, but we almost like built each other's freedom, like that
Yeah.
trade-off of like, I'm going to help you, you're going to help me. It's so beautiful when you build those relationships. And sometimes you just have to keep trying and keep offering and keep asking and keep, you just keep building your relationships until you find those people where you're like, we're helping each other right now. And you have just something really sacred and beautiful in those moments.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I can so relate to what you said. Sometimes it's easier to watch four kids than just yours two.
Yeah.
Especially, oh my gosh, when kids play together, it's almost like you have four kids at the house, but you get a little break, right? Because they play so nice. Okay, lunchtime. They came, they ate, they clean up. It's just I
Mhm.
love that too. And you're right. It is important to be helpful to each other, to not always take but give as well, and make sure that we support one another.
Yeah.
So you now have been involved in over 200 births.
Yes. Actually getting
Wow,
closer to 300 now, but yes.
really?
Yeah.
And so you said you're gonna stay kind of in this doula profession, but then you wanted to become midwife, possibly, right?
Yes. I love the idea of being a midwife, like the midwife that I had, where
Mm-hmm.
I had those hour-long appointments. But she was an independent midwife. She worked for herself and she burned herself out and she no longer practices midwifery, right?
Yeah.
And most of the midwives that take that path have that very short career because it's not very sustainable to be on call. And if you're thinking about like, hey, I'm responsible for providing for my family, so I also am responsible for providing an income, you're making the same from a 15-minute appointment as you are from an hour-long appointment. And you have the same, you still have to have your office, your insurance, your secretary, like your expenses are the same. So it's a gigantic sacrifice for those midwives that practice that way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not very sustainable. So, yes, I would love to someday have those clinical skills and practice that way. But for now, I am absolutely loving being a doula because I can't do the clinical stuff. Like,
Yeah.
I cannot take someone's blood pressure. I cannot be the one to like administer Pitocin if you're hemorrhaging. But I can be the person that comes in like, okay, so you're getting the clinical stuff from the system that exists. But look, here's your doula services that are going to wrap around that and give you those hours of relationships with somebody so somebody knows who you are going into birth. What are your dreams? What are your hopes? What are your fears? How do you deal with stress? How do you feel safe and relaxed and open as you're going into birth? Because those are so fundamental. That sense of safety and security and being seen is fundamental to your body's ability to labor. It's such a hormonal process and so easily disturbed that having someone that makes you feel safe is extraordinarily important. And when they do studies on doula, they really do show that like we reduce C-section rates. Mothers come through with less trauma. They're less likely to, even if you have a hard birth, you're less likely to have like PTSD from it and more likely to wrap around and say like, holy crap, like I grew a whole human and I did that. I can do anything. Like you come through with this empowerment and sense of expanded sense of self versus in the system where you don't have that support or that being seen or that deeper experience, then you don't really get that, right? And then as I've been a doula longer, I've also expanded into postpartum doula services. So
Mm-hmm.
I typically do like 6 4-hour visits with people after. So they're also getting help with lactation and feeding and how do we work together as a partnership with this? Like he's tired, I'm tired. I hear dads cry about feeling the loss of their family when a mom and baby are entering into this very sacred cocoon of breastfeeding. And a dad's like, how do I fit into this family now? And to be able to have those conversations and open the doors and, just be present as it's all unfolding in a way that's like, hey, what if you opened this door? Or hey, this is how you can step into that relationship, and just to those little nuances of care that are both nutritional and psychological and just very practical, in the sense that, like, sometimes I just hold a baby for 4 hours and feed them, and
Yeah.
mom and dad both rest, and then they're happier. Uh,
Oh my goodness, rest is so important.
yeah. Yeah, I love getting to offer that, like, comprehensive wraparound care to the pregnancy, postpartum era.
When is usually women would hire a doula? Like how far in the pregnancy, I don't know, do you have to be, or is there a time, right,
Yeah.
when you hire a doula?
Yeah. I mean, I would say there's no too late, in the sense that if you're like 8 months pregnant and you're like, I'm on the fence, you can always find a doula. Like, there's, like, a lot of my early births that I did were like last minute people who just decided they want a doula, and it's like, I'm available, and they pick the person that's available. And so there's never like a too late. If you want somebody very experienced who has been to a lot of births, you need to start looking in the beginning of your second trimester. My calendar, like for me, I just book out 3, 4, 5, almost 6 months in advance. So
Mhm.
you really have to start looking early. Um, if you want, the more comprehensive care you want, or the more trained or experienced, the earlier you should look.
You said that you now do also postpartum care, right? Is
Yeah.
that typical for a doula to do that, or is it just some that choose to do that? Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so postpartum doulas and birth doulas, some people operate as, like, I have combined those because it meets my family's needs and my clients' needs very well. Like, there's
Mhm.
this beautiful synergy there. Different people will specialize different ways. If you have the courage to be a business owner, you can define your packages how you want. A very good friend of mine is only a birth doula, and she probably goes to like 12 births a month, where now I do just two, maybe three.
Mhm.
Another very good friend of mine only does postpartum, but you can hire her for like to see you for overnight shifts for like 3 months, right? Where she's with your family for like 3 or 4 nights a week. So if you know what your needs are, you can probably find a doula or a combo pack of doulas to kind of fit those needs. Um, it is wonderful that I'd call it a strength and a weakness of the profession, that it is not as well defined and not as driven structurally from like insurance and mega corporations. And so there's beauty in that, because you can find the right person. There's not
Mhm.
beauty in that, as in the sense that, like, you can pick almost any OBA and you're going to get almost the same care with any of them, right? Because it's so standardized. But when it comes to doula services, you really have to get to know the person, get to know what their package is, get to know their style. Like, it's a lot more on you to think, this is what my needs are. And so this is the type of doula I need. You might have to do a little more searching, that you'll
Yeah.
get a deeper alignment typically.
Does doula usually covered by insurance?
Not typically.
Okay.
However, I will say here in Washington, Medicaid just started covering doula care. So we can do 2 prenatal visits, attend the birth, and then 25 hours of postpartum care for any family on Medicaid. There are a handful of states throughout the country that have done that. And then there are a lot of companies that
Mhm.
cover doulas as part of their fertility benefits. So if you have
Okay.
fertility benefits from your employer, there's a really good chance that you have doula coverage. And some of those offer like tremendous amounts of coverage. Like I've had clients that have had almost where their employers have said you can pretty much have unlimited postpartum care for the first 6 weeks, like up to 16 hours a day. Most people don't need that much care. That's kind of excessive, but it
Yeah.
is there for those that want it.
That's interesting. So you basically have to, it's a good point that you bring that you have to look, you have to know what you need, right? To
Yeah.
find a doula that will do that for you. But you also depending where you work, because like I said, like you said, some companies cover that a lot, or just look at your whatever medical coverage you have. I want to ask you about your education. You have online courses that I went on your website, and for anybody who's looking for that, I will put that website. You have like a lot of different stuff. So tell me, first of all, like why? Because you're already busy, right? You're already being a doula. You have your family. You're doing all of that. Why did you decide to add childbirth education on top?
Yeah. Oh my God, that's such a good question. So I have always, since entering this career field, have been very passionate about childbirth education because most of the childbirth classes out there, I would say, are not. If you go to your local hospital and you take a class through your hospital, it's really more about like learning what it means to be a patient in this institution. It's not really about the holistic, like, hey, you're going through this life transformative experience. What skills and tools do you need to be successful? And then there's like very natural birth courses and very like medical birth courses. But most people are somewhere in the middle. Like a lot of people who want a natural birth are like, I really want to be successful with a natural birth, but I'm not ruling out,
Mhm.
like maybe I want to do it at the hospital. Maybe I'm doing a home birth, but I'll transfer to the hospital if I want an epidural. Or, sometimes there are moms who want epidurals, but then you get to the hospital, or you might have like I worked with one mom this year that had 4 days of prodromal labor. So essentially she was having contractions every 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, but the hospital would not admit her yet because they weren't close enough together. So we called 6 times to ask if we could come in, and they kept saying stay home. So she really I was really glad that even though she was planning on an epidural, she had planned on her worked through some labor coping skills because she really needed them, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes the anesthesiologist isn't as available as you expect or want, or it takes longer to get through triage, or they're not going to admit you yet because they're waiting for a room to open and you're not like that far in labor yet.
Yeah.
Like it's really important to kind of have both open and to have objective information, right? Like choosing to get an epidural can be a fabulous decision, but it comes with pros and cons, risks and benefits. And it's very hard to get, the full story,
Yeah.
so you can really think through like, do I want this or do I not? And then get support from your plan either way. So I really wanted to make a course because I wanted my moms to be prepared. um, but one of the things that was really frustrating to me was when, like, I would be with a mom who took like a hypnobirthing course, but kind of took it, and then was shocked by how painful labor was and was completely unprepared for the pain. And on the other hand, like moms who are wanting these healthy natural births, but nobody taught them about prenatal nutrition. And now it's the end of their pregnancy and they're dealing with crazy high blood pressure and all these complications that maybe nutrition wouldn't have made a difference. But the research shows that for most people, it probably would. And like 70% of women are not getting enough protein, and
Mm.
like 80% of women are not getting enough vegetables. Like, those are incredibly basic things that like you need to learn about how important your nutrition is in your prenatal class, and most don't show that. So I kind of created the class bit by bit as I was kind of like trying to supplement my clients' education. And then finally I was like, this is a childbirth course. Let's like put it together in a package and make it like a week by week experience so families and couples can do it together.
You're doing such an amazing job with supporting women in such a beautiful and unique way, because what you said at the very beginning, even about yourself, how you thought that birth was scary.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, again, each woman has different story of what she did. Was it natural? Was it C-section? Was it epidural? Was it not? But it's such a beautiful experience. I think you're providing such a great resources to women
Thank
in
you
everything you
so
do
much.
with your practice.
Yeah. I really look back at my life journey and I think about like that pivotal point when I was like going through my divorce and I was really wanting to go back to finance, but also very scared of like, what if I did that and then lost my job because I didn't have childcare or,
Mm.
and I'm so glad that like, I'm not necessarily a person of I'm not sure if I believe in God or not, but I do believe that in that moment there was things being moved around me that pushed me this direction because it's where my heart and soul is, and I am so glad that it was not easy for me to go somewhere that was safe and familiar, that I had to do the scary thing, and I had like it was the practical thing for my family, it was what I wanted to do, but there's so many, like, uncertainties when you
Mm.
kind of forge your own path, and that was, like, a very challenging time in life, but I am so glad that I just kept going because I don't know, I love the women I work for. I absolutely adore them. And I believe that we can have safer, happier, more prepared mothers who, and I believe it is our divine right to come into parenthood joyful and safe and happy, that our biology supports that, that our systems just need to get around to supporting it. And
Yeah,
thank you so much.
you can see the way you talk, you can see it in your eyes that you are doing what you meant to do. And the challenging time, there were all the signs, like you said, it was something was moving. Was it either that's God, the universe, the higher power, that does exist for all of us, that putting us into the right path, and we just have to listen to it, and I believe that we all here to do something, right? It doesn't matter what it is, but we here with the purpose. And it's so important and it's so beautiful when I talk to people and they're doing exactly what they meant to do. It's just, no matter, because it gets hard, right? Like staying up at night, doing all of these things that when you have 9 to 5 you don't have to. Bye, I'll see you Monday, but when you have your own business, sometimes I see you tomorrow and Sunday and all of that stuff. But if it's something that you love, you move easier through those tough times.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And it lights you up in a way that's like, you have to take care of you, but I feel very fortunate that I do see my career and my work as a form of self-care. It's a way of self-expression and a way of being in the world that is taking care of myself as well as the people around me. And I just hope for all women, all people to have careers that are meaningful like that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And thank you so much for telling your story, for being so open about your own personal life. Because I know sometimes it's not easy to open up, especially somebody you don't know. But I get so lucky. I am so lucky to have amazing people on my podcast that just open up in such a beautiful way and sharing their story with other people. And it, people resonate with each other's story, because I always say sharing a story has the power to heal. Because if another woman hears, like, who's going through divorce now, that you say, yes, it was hard, but now it's better, it gets, no matter what it is, it gets better. So thank you so much for coming on. I had a great time talking with you.
Thank you so much for having me and for creating this safe and beautiful place for us to share our stories. It's so meaningful.